From the moment Overhaulin hit the airwaves, Chip Foose wasn't just another builder. He was the builder. Sleek designs, heartfelt reveals, and an almost cinematic on-screen presence made him a household name. Viewers didn't just admire his work, they believed in his character. He was presented as the kind of man who balanced world-class craftsmanship with a strong moral compass. Behind the wheel of his rising fame was the image of the perfect family man, humble, grounded, and happily married. Public appearances with his wife were frequent and endearing. Car shows, interviews, and behind-the-scenes specials often included touching stories about their relationship, how she supported his career, how they shared a vision. It was the kind of wholesome dynamic that made him stand out in an industry full of egos and excess. Every time Chip spoke of his team, you could feel that family was part of that foundation. His fans weren't just following a designer. They were buying into a brand of trust, loyalty, and devotion. Even his sketches seemed to carry that energy. Meticulous, thoughtful, filled with purpose. He wasn't flashy. He was focused. In magazines, he'd be pictured with his arm around his wife, both smiling effortlessly as if life was in perfect sync. It was the kind of love story you wanted to root for, one where creative genius didn't have to come at the cost of emotional balance. For years, that image held strong. But as the show climbed in popularity and the demands on Foose's time increased, small cracks began to show. Nothing obvious, no scandals, no headlines, but subtle shifts. Appearances changed. Interviews became more guarded. Mentions of his family life slowly tapered off. The carefully crafted image remained intact on the surface, but beneath it, something had changed, and fans started to notice. For years, Chip Foose seemed untouchable, not just as a designer, but as a man. But as Overhaulin hit its peak, and his name became synonymous with flawless builds and feel-good reveals, the silence around his personal life started to speak volumes. Fans on forums began to ask, why is his wife no longer appearing in episodes? Why did Chip seem less enthusiastic in certain interviews? Why were there fewer candid moments, no more mentions of vacations, family dinners, or how she helps me keep my balance? The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. The man who once shared so openly about the foundation behind his success had grown quiet on the topic. It started with speculation. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe the show had simply evolved. But in a world where public perception is curated, small absences often carry loud meanings. Longtime fans began to comb through recent appearances. They noticed her absence at award shows. Public event photos showed Chip with team members, but never with the woman who used to stand by his side. Even social media, usually a goldmine for personal insight, offered no clues, no family photos, no mentions of anniversaries, nothing. The whispers grew, and while nothing was ever confirmed at the time, the fan base, devoted and invested, began to sense something had shifted behind the scenes. There was no scandal, no tabloid frenzy, just silence. The kind of silence that makes people wonder. And in that vacuum, the public began crafting their own theories. Was there tension at home? Had the demands of running a global brand started to chip away at something more personal? To many, the situation felt un-Foose-like. He had always stood for integrity, consistency, and commitment. But now, questions lingered in the background of every episode. Viewers weren't just tuning in for the cars, they were watching for signs. And what they saw left them unsettled. When Chip Foose went from a respected designer to a household name, few could have predicted just how fast the spotlight would grow. The man who once worked quietly in a Southern California shop now had a camera crew in his face, millions of eyes watching his every move, and clients flying in from around the world. But with that fame came something far more demanding than a television schedule: expectation. Fans wanted perfection. Clients wanted miracles. Networks wanted content. And Chip delivered, over and over, at a price. The toll of that fame wasn't immediately visible. Foose was always the consummate professional, smiling, calm, in control. But behind the scenes, those close to the shop say something different. Long hours, early mornings, endless revisions, missed dinners, canceled trips. The kind of sacrifices that don't show up on screen but stack up in real life, especially at home. His shop wasn't just a business, it was his legacy. But as it grew, so did the gap between work and family. The balance became harder to maintain. While the cameras rolled on Chip crafting another masterpiece, his absence from home became louder. And slowly, inevitably, the pressure started to erode the foundation he'd always valued most: his marriage. Those who've worked with Chip describe him as focused to a fault. When he's in design mode, the world disappears. And that gift, what made him brilliant, may have also made him unavailable. Not emotionally cold, but emotionally consumed. Add in international appearances, speaking engagements, and the sheer responsibility of running Foose Design, and you have a man pulled in 100 directions. Fame, ironically, made him less visible to the one place he once prioritized most: his own home. Ask anyone close to Chip Foose, and they'll say the same thing. The man doesn't stop. From the early days of building hot rods with his dad to designing award-winning customs in front of TV cameras, Chip's work ethic has always bordered on obsessive. And that obsession, while inspiring, may have come at a cost even he didn't fully see until it was too late. Because when you pour every ounce of yourself into the craft, there's not always enough left over for the people who matter most. Chip wasn't just building cars, he was building an empire. The Foose name became synonymous with excellence. There were deadlines to meet, employees to pay, deals to close, and reputations to protect. While other shops chased fame, Chip built quietly, meticulously, with his name on the line every time. And when you carry that kind of weight, personal life often becomes a distant second. Some insiders say Chip would work through holidays, skip family events, and disappear into his design loft for days. Not out of malice, but out of mission. He wasn't trying to ignore anyone. He just couldn't shut it off. His brain was always sketching, analyzing, refining. It's the kind of mindset that produces brilliance, and, sometimes, isolation. Over time, those missed moments stack up. The partner who once understood the hustle begins to feel forgotten. The shared life becomes parallel tracks. Same house, different worlds. And the empire? It grows. But the connection? It fades. In interviews post-divorce, Chip's tone shifted slightly. Still gracious, still passionate, but with a subtle weight behind his words, as if the cost of greatness had finally made itself known. Not in scandal, not in drama, but in the quiet recognition that sometimes building dreams means losing the ones you built them for. Behind every empire lies a story few get to see. In Chip Foose's case, that story may have involved a financial wound he never let the public notice. While his business seemed solid from the outside, booming shop, premium merchandise, high-profile builds, whispers from insiders suggest there may have been something hidden beneath the surface, a financial strain that threatened everything he'd built. Some former associates quietly allege that Foose Design was forced to absorb a costly mistake, a failed investment, A soured deal with a parts supplier, or even a quiet legal settlement. Whatever the cause, it allegedly created mounting tension, both in the shop and at home. One former contractor recalled hearing about a check that bounced during a build that should have never had budgeting issues. Another source claimed that Chip, known for perfection, was taking on more client cars than ever. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. What does this have to do with the marriage? Everything. If you're already stretched emotionally, working long hours, and sacrificing time at home, and then a financial curveball hits, it's often the final crack in the foundation. Even worse, Foose may have kept it quiet to protect his brand, to protect her. No public lawsuit, no public fallout, just quiet stress, silent dinners, sleepless nights, and a widening emotional gap. Those closest to the family believed this financial stress was never about greed. It was about pride. Chip didn't want to admit there was a problem. Not to fans, not to the press, maybe not even to his partner. And so, the man known for fixing cars with perfect symmetry slowly lost balance in his personal life. If true, it paints a much more human story. One of a man juggling everything: business, fame, art, love, and finally running out of hands. When most celebrity relationships fall apart, the world knows. Press releases fly. Gossip sites churn. But when Chip Foose's marriage came to an end, it was as quiet as a closing garage door after hours. There were no major announcements, no social media meltdowns, no TMZ cameras or dramatic interviews, just silence. And yet, that silence was deafening to longtime fans. Those paying close attention saw the shift. No more posts with his wife, no family photos at car shows, no mentions of anniversaries or shared milestones. Slowly but surely, it became clear. Something had changed. And while the Foose brand stayed polished, the man behind it looked just a little more reserved, a little more distant. Public records later confirmed what many suspected: a legal separation and eventual divorce. But the filings were sealed. The details? Locked tight. No alimony drama, no custody battles. Just a clean legal line drawn across years of partnership. And for many fans, that raised more questions than answers. Why the silence? Why the effort to keep everything under wraps? Some say it was Chip's way of protecting what remained of his personal life. Others believe it was mutual. A quiet agreement to part ways without spectacle. Either way, it was a far cry from the way most public figures handle divorce. And maybe that's the most Foose thing about it. He didn't air grievances. He didn't throw blame. He simply kept building. But if you looked closely, his smile on camera wasn't quite the same. Not fake, but not as full. Like a man who knew the cost of privacy and paid it in full. Digging into Chip Foose's divorce is like trying to restore a rusted-out barn find. You know the story's in there, but the surface reveals very little. Official records verify that a dissolution of marriage took place, but almost every detail remains sealed. There's no dramatic lawsuit, no tell-all book, just a quiet line in the county ledger, tucked away like a misfiled invoice. But that hasn't stopped people from speculating about what really happened, and why. Some fans believe there was infidelity, though no credible source has confirmed this. Others suggest emotional burnout, the kind that builds after decades of pressure. A few even think the two simply outgrew each other. High school sweethearts split by the forces of fame and time. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. It wasn't just a minor speed bump. It marked a turning point. After the divorce, some noticed a change in Foose's output. The cars were still immaculate, but something felt different. The heart was still there, but maybe the joy was harder to find. Interviewers reported that he was still gracious and friendly, but far more guarded when asked about anything personal. One journalist even said, "It's like he built a firewall around his soul." This shift didn't affect the brand's success. If anything, it made fans rally behind him more. They saw the pain behind the polish. The man who gave so much to the car world, quietly carrying a weight no one could quite name. And while the court documents may never tell the full story, they confirm what many suspected. Something big changed behind the scenes. And Chip? He kept showing up. Quiet, steady, alone. For years, Chip Foose was the face and soul of Foose Design. His vision shaped every line, every weld, every stroke of color. But after the divorce, some fans and insiders noticed something shift. The builds were still beautiful, but they no longer carried that same intangible spark. The emotional pulse that made Foose Creations feel alive. It wasn't that the work suffered technically. It was something deeper, something harder to measure. The passion behind the process. Employees reportedly said the shop's energy changed. Music still played. Projects still moved forward. But the mood grew quieter, more focused, more mechanical. Like the crew was following a formula, not a feeling. Some even speculated that Chip began handing off more design responsibility. Not because he couldn't do it, but because he needed space. Not just physical space, but emotional breathing room. This wasn't burnout in the usual sense. It wasn't creative failure. It was grief, dressed in silence. A man who had given everything to his craft, suddenly unsure of what it gave back. And though Foose never publicly acknowledged this period as a struggle, it's clear in the pacing of projects, the tone of interviews, and even the spacing of public appearances. Foose Design didn't fall apart. That's important to note. The shop continued to deliver world-class customs. But those who watched closely could tell. Chip was carrying something, and that weight, that quiet storm behind the scenes, inevitably left fingerprints on the brand. Like a perfect paint job hiding a dent beneath, the shop's exterior never cracked. But anyone who's ever built something from the ground up knows, sometimes, the real damage is in the frame. Today, Chip Foose is still designing, still building, still smiling in front of cameras, but there's a different energy now. Not worse, not broken, just changed. It's the look of a man who's lived through something private and painful and chosen to keep going anyway. A man who now carries wisdom where he once carried weight. Recent appearances show a slightly more reserved Chip, still warm, still articulate, but less eager to share the personal details. He dodges questions about relationships. He redirects praise to his team. He speaks more about legacy than limelight. And when he talks about design, there's a deeper focus on meaning. Not just aesthetics, but what a car represents to the owner, to the builder, to the people watching. Some fans think he's stronger now, tempered like metal, reshaped by fire. Others say he's finally at peace with letting the myth fade and the man emerge. He's no longer just the Overhaulin guy. He's an elder statesman of custom car culture, a survivor of both industry pressures and personal heartbreak. Foose's newer projects still make headlines, but they seem more intentional. Less about flash, more about legacy. There's something poetic about that. The man once praised for speed and style now chooses slower builds, deeper meanings, and fewer words. In that silence, there's strength. In that shift, there's clarity. Chip Foose is still writing his story, but now he's writing it on his own terms. Despite all the speculation, the sealed court files, the subtle shifts in demeanor, and the whispers from former insiders, there's one reality that fans and critics alike must accept. We may never know the full story behind Chip Foose's divorce. And maybe we're not supposed to. For all the curiosity surrounding his personal life, Foose has never lashed out, never defended himself, never sold his story to a tabloid. That restraint in itself says something. Maybe it's old-school honor. Maybe it's pain. Maybe it's just the way he copes, with a wrench in hand and the rest buried deep. And yet, the silence speaks volumes. The absence of drama, the missing commentary, the quiet fade of family mentions from interviews. It all points to a man who endured something real, something raw, and chose dignity over disclosure. In a world obsessed with oversharing, that makes Chip a rare breed. What we do know is this: he kept building. He showed up. He didn't let personal loss destroy a professional legacy. If anything, it made him more focused, more human, more relatable. He reminded the world that even perfectionists have pain. Even legends have limits. Because at the end of the day, Chip Foose is more than a TV personality. He's a person, a builder, a husband turned ex, a father, a quiet warrior in a world that rarely pauses to listen. And maybe that's the greatest design of all: the ability to shape beauty from brokenness and keep moving forward, one flawless line at a time.